Now, since everyone's gonna say, why don't you ever do a pull in the truck, I guess we'll do one today. Try and roll into first easy. Howdy my friends, and welcome to the channel. I'm Luke, Thunderhead289 here on YouTube, and in this video today we're going to take a look at my F100's fuel return line system. Now, in our last video where we were discussing the effects of fuel pressure and how it interacts with the overall dynamics of a carburetor and the air-fuel ratio of your different circuits, some of you folks noticed the return line in my truck, and you're just curious about some of the parts and pieces. Now, there's a lot out there on return lines, so I'm not going to try and reinvent the wheel here for you guys today. The biggest difficulty with setting up a return line on your vehicle is cutting into your fuel tank so you have an effective return. Now, in our video here today, we're going to keep it very simple. Our main focus is we're going to take a look at how I'm actually returning the fuel to my gas tank. A lot of folks struggle with this. These old vehicles don't have a provision built in, and they do make little weld-on additions that are a lot of work with dropping your tank. And I'm going to show you here today something I did that extremely simplified the process of effectively returning fuel back to your gas tank. So with that, let's jump on the outside of the vehicle here and take a look. So really quick, before we jump out and take a look at the return line system, I want to give you the why. Why is the fuel return line system so significant in a carbureted engine? What are the advantages of going through the effort to do this? So a carburetor is really cool how it can control all the metering of fuel, but it has its limitations. It's a static metering device. So the more consistent you can keep the inputs to the carburetor, the more consistent your output is going to be. On an old school engine, the fuel sits up in the engine bay. In some cases it can even vapor lock, but even if it doesn't, that fuel is getting hot. The density of that fuel is changing, and overall, all of these changes equivocate out to some inconsistency in your tune. And it's most notable at idle because you're flowing the least amount of volume through your carburetor, and so those little changes equivocate out to some large differentiation. So ever since I installed a return line system in this old F100, I've noticed a dramatic difference in the stability of the air-fuel ratio at idle. Now, you still have some variability there. You still have underhood heat and other things to contend with, but moreover, you're not going to go from 9 all the way up to 18 on the spectrum throughout the day. It stays, fairly within an acceptable range where you don't have to monkey with too much. So it's a pretty nice setup, and I'm going to show you a simple way of how to do it today. So finally, let's take a look. All right, so hanging out here under the old rust bucket where I actually opted to return my fuel to my gas tank is in my filler neck instead of actually in my gas tank over here itself. Now, Moroso makes a really trick part for this, and I'll leave the link below, but it's pretty awesome where you can cut it into a filler neck. It's got a little 90 inside pointing towards your gas tank. Nice large port, so it's not going to build up any back pressure on it. And you can put this in like 30 minutes. It comes with some couplers if you have a metal filler neck also to hook this guy in, but it's super slick, super easy. There's a lot of things that can go wrong with dropping your gas tank, a lot of things that you can break. It's a fairly arduous task, and you can just totally avoid that by going with one of these guys. And like I said, it's a nice large gauge of line, like 3/8, a ½ inch or so. I can't remember, it's one or the other, but plenty so that you're not going to build up back pressure and you're going to have no issues returning fuel. So taking a look under the hood here of how I have my bypass system set up, we're not going to spend a lot of time on this piece in this video because there's a lot of different ways to skin this cat, and it all really comes down to your preference. But I'll explain why I did the way that I did it here, and we'll just take a quick look. So basically, I have a dedicated bypass regulator. Now how that works is I have fuel coming up and my extremely hazardous rubber lines that I need to fix, and it goes into the carburetor, and then into the regulator, and then whatever excess it doesn't take to maintain my setting of fuel pressure on the carburetor is then bypassed back to the gas tank. Now what I like about this is if you open the throttle and you need more fuel to maintain fuel pressure, that regulator will allow less fuel to return and more to go into the carburetor. So it's nice in that regard, but also it bypasses a large volume of fuel. Now the reason that's important is because that better regulates the temperature of your fuel at the carburetor. You know, it doesn't spend a lot of time up here to get hot, and it makes for a lot more consistent fuel temp. Now I'm sure at this point you've noticed that I don't have a mechanical fuel pump, which would be located right in this general area on a small block Ford. Now I do have an electric fuel pump out back. It's a budget unit that I've talked about before, and I'll leave the link to it below also. But the benefit of this setup with running an electric pump is an electric fuel pump runs a consistent volume regardless of RPM. Now what's nice about that with this return line setup is that since it's always running the same volume at idle, when we're not consuming a lot of that volume to fuel the engine, again, it's bypassing all of that fuel, and it has the capacity to effectively do this, where a mechanical fuel pump necessarily doesn't. Now, just as I said earlier, there's a lot of different ways to set up your fuel return line system, and I've just seen it this way is pretty effective, but it's by no means the absolute you have to do it this way. Well, all right guys, I appreciate you coming along with me today for this video. I'll leave all of the parts and pieces, the links below, so if you wanted to emulate what I have set up here on my own vehicle, you know, you can do that. There's nothing special about how I've set everything up, and it's all pretty easy to replicate. And like I said, you know, there's a lot of different ways to skin this cat. You don't have to do this exactly like how I did it. There's a lot of different ways to do the return line system on the underhood side. What I want to give you today, the takeaway, is that one part that makes it super simple to actually connect your return line to your gas tank. That is the part that of this whole setup that is the most difficult to get put in and working correctly, and that thing just makes it super easy. Someone tipped me off to it about 3 years ago. I wish I remembered your name. It was on YouTube, but yeah, I mean, it's just night and day easier than fooling around with your gas tank. So anyway, you know, if you don't take anything else away from that, that's the one thing I want you to pay attention to. So anyway, with that, catch you guys later. It's a beautiful day. I'm gonna get the dogs out here and run them around. So we'll see you for the next one.